Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Got a few people still on the phone. Solid. This is going to be engaging. Thank you so much, really, for making space and time for this presentation. Really appreciate it. I'm really intrigued by this high-level question of what is it that Patagonia and the Humane Society have in common? Like, what is this presentation actually going to be about? And I'm just going to come right out with the lead and not bury it. At the end of the day, I think what's really unique about both of those organizations is they're positioning their customers, or in the case of the Humane Society, their supporters, as the hero in a really compelling story that reaches a lot of different channels. My name is Matt Scott. I am the co-founder and CEO of Cosmic. We are a digital cause marketing firm working exclusively with nonprofits to help them leverage technology, storytelling, and design to raise gobs of money so that they can go out and solve some of the world's most pressing problems. By a show of hands, how many people are here from a nonprofit? One. This is going to feel like two. It's going to feel like a very private presentation. Now, while the focus is going to be a lot on nonprofit space, because that's what that's all we do, is we do nonprofit fundraising and marketing. There is a lot of tactics that we deploy with our nonprofit clients that are taken from some of the leading brands on the for-profit side, or some of the things that we're doing that I think could be deployed in the for-profit realm. So hopefully it still is relevant and engaging for you. I'm actually going to start this off with one of my favorite for-profit companies, Patagonia, which was really the premise for this conversation here today. What I love about Patagonia is they are laser focused on their mission, which is being in business to save our home planet. The people at Patagonia believe that we have an immediate threat to our planet caused by a lot of different reasons, but we as individual consumers have a role that we can play when choosing where we're going to invest our money, be it to buy gear or clothes, or a lot of times they're advocating for us not to purchase things, to build things that are going to last generations so that people are not out there over-consuming. And I think that's a really interesting approach to marketing, because what they've done is they've said, we have this North Star, we have this problem that we're trying to solve. We're going about it as a business, and we are going to place the customer as the hero in that story so that it's not Patagonia solving this problem, it's each and every one of us as individual consumers who actually can take action to make a meaningful difference. This particularly stood out to me. I received a catalog from Patagonia that featured different athletes or consumers of their brand, outdoor enthusiasts, as the hero in the story. So in this case, this gentleman cycles, and this incredible woman here is a rock climber. And in these full spreads, you can read and see how these outdoor adventure enthusiasts are really making conscious decisions to reduce their environmental impact, and that's what they're getting out of being associated with the Patagonia brand. This is not me, but you can't tell by looking at me, but I am actually training right now to swim across the Columbia River, which anybody from Portland or Oregon, Washington, one. If we just keep going, the PNW, no? Okay. So the Columbia River is the Pacific Northwest's largest river, and it runs from Canada all the way to the Pacific Ocean through Washington and Oregon. And so I'm spending a lot of time in the pool these days in the morning, and therefore have a lot of time to think. And I was thinking about how is it that we can leverage the same strategy that Patagonia does for the nonprofit clients that we serve. And at the heart of it is positioning a supporter as the hero in the story. So at Cosmic, we think about the supporters as defined as volunteers, donors, fundraisers, and advocates. Those are the four major profile types for nonprofits. Those are the four ways that people usually engage with a nonprofit: as a volunteer, donor, fundraiser, or advocate. And by positioning them as the hero in that story, you can really move them through a journey or a funnel to increase their value to your organization. So a couple of examples. Team Rubicon is an organization that repurposes the skills and experience of military veterans to respond to natural disasters. And they're tremendous at positioning military veterans who are volunteering on these disaster relief operations and missions as a hero across all their channels. And I had the privilege before working at Cosmic of running development operations at Team Rubicon, where we scaled from $250,000 to $40 million a year in annual revenue and grew our volunteer base from 7 to over 100,000. We did that by positioning the volunteer as the hero in the story. It wasn't Team Rubicon solving this problem of veteran reintegration or disaster response. It was the individual volunteers, and they could see themselves in those who were represented in the storytelling. And that created more than just a brief interaction, a transactional interaction. What it created was a tribe, a sense of belonging, a community. Similarly, that was the volunteer. We've got a donor. This donor, her name is Pauline, and she donates to an organization called Salamta Family Project, and they're working to pair marginalized women with orphan children in Ethiopia to create these family units. And Pauline has a tremendous story like so many of us. She's got a great relationship with her mom. And her mom actually passed away from cancer. And it was through this experience that she was reflecting on, wow, I see in their storytelling the relationship that I had with my mom. How can I honor my mom by making a contribution to Salamta Family Project to help create these forever families? Last example before we dive in deeper is, this guy is just unbelievable. His name is Zan, but he goes by Hulk. That's his power name. He is a pancreatic cancer survivor. People aren't supposed to survive from that. He's on his 7th year now, and he just got out of surgery a few days ago again. He did a 6-hour kiteboarding event to help raise money for other young adult cancer survivors to reclaim their lives after cancer through these outdoor adventure camps that Project Koru puts on. The Hulk raised over $35,000 himself, and we leveraged his whole power name and whole ethos to raise over $250,000 in a 2-day event in Hood River just a few weeks ago. We had a theme, Harness Your Hulk. And you could see all of the different people who were participating in this fundraising event. They could see themselves represented in Hulk, other survivors, and they did a tremendous job of raising a bunch of money. So the 3 major components of placing a volunteer, donor, fundraiser, advocate, or even customer as the hero in a narrative or story starts with knowing your audience. Who is your audience? What connects them to your cause? What connects them to your product? What connects them to whatever it is that you're selling, story or impact or product? Second, understanding and learning about what their communication preferences are and honoring those preferences. And lastly, executing and learning from how people actually interact and engage with your content. Because we've found that a lot of times people, how they identify their preferences are actually not their preferences. So when you look at their behavior, it's not always aligned with what their stated preferences are. So this is our marketing funnel at Cosmic, and I'm just going to go over briefly these 3 principles before we dive into the case study. This is how we think about the donor journey or supporter journey. And this is probably similar to marketing funnels that for-profits use, but the difference is that we are trying to increase the total lifetime value of a donor. So if you're a one-time donor, how do we get you to contribute monthly? If you're an event attendee, how do we get you to peer-to-peer fundraise? If you give annually, how do we get you to become a planned giver? These are just ways in which someone can increase their engagement with a nonprofit. We do this by sending out really interesting and engaging content across lots of channels, again, that place that supporter as the hero. This is the Cosmic Impact Model, which highlights the relationship between the amount of time that has passed since a supporter has taken action and the amount of effort that goes into creating the content. So if you go back to that Team Rubicon example where you saw that veteran reflection, that would be an example of a quote card, which is not that it does require some investment. You have to collect their story. You have to put it together in a designed template. But that's not video. That's not infographic. It's not measuring impact. As you can see, the more time that goes on, you can reinforce that story across channels. And ultimately, while we're all here at this conference, it's about right message, right time, right channel. So how do you deliver by knowing who your target audience is and what connects them to the cause? How do you then deliver that story consistently and frequently across all channels? So I'm going to use the Oregon Humane Society as a case study. The Oregon Humane Society is the oldest humane society in the country. It's been around for over 150 years. And for over 150 years, the Humane Society, together with other Oregonians, have impacted positively the lives of animals through no-kill shelters, pet adoption, veterinarian care, rescues, all kinds of stuff. And they approached us in helping them turn their Doggy Dash, their annual fundraiser event. It's a run-walk event. They wanted to take that to another level, and they've been doing this event for a couple of decades. They had a primary goal: increase revenue. That probably sounds a lot like a for-profit company too. Trying to make parallels. Sorry, there's like 2 people from nonprofits, and thank you. Courtesy laugh, I'll take it. The second, how were we going to do that? We needed to increase attendance. We had to get people to come to the event. And then we needed to increase their engagement. Remember that funnel. You're an event attendee. How do we turn you into a peer-to-peer fundraiser? Well, it starts by really knowing the audience. It starts by knowing the audience. So we sought to understand who are the different heroes that are participating in this walk-run event. Who are they? What do they care about? What motivates them? Understanding from a content perspective what is going to really delight them. So to do this, we looked at the existing data. We looked at how were people interacting in the past, what messaging when we were asking for them to come and participate, what worked, what didn't work. In the case of Oregon Humane Society and so many nonprofits, unfortunately, they didn't necessarily prioritize conversion metrics and understanding what worked and didn't work. So we had to go to a next phase too. We had to deploy surveys. We had to test our assumptions by reaching out to the existing supporters and try and categorize why they were interested in participating in the event. And once we compiled that, we actually conducted interviews, stakeholder interviews, to finally kind of validate our findings. So we used Twilio for Salesforce to do this, the app, and we used Form Assembly, and we sent out that donor survey information. What's really great is obviously that data fed back into the contact record within Salesforce, and Oregon Humane Society was using Pardot, so we were able to eventually use those communication preferences that they had identified during this initial market research phase to drive certain types of content to them. I'll talk a little bit more about how we did that during the checkout process as well. What we're really excited about is the ability to take that and make it so much easier now by actually sending out that survey information through a flow, as well as scheduling some of those interviews, because that was actually a very labor-intensive process. Even when we were using Twilio for Salesforce, sending out messages and trying to get people to book, having a flow would allow us to have reached many more people. We were only able to do market research on a limited number of people because of those limitations. So what did we find? We found that there were 3 major profile types. These are people who participated in Doggy Dash. The first was a mission admirer. These are people who probably volunteered or adopted a pet from OHS. They had some kind of programmatic call to puppies and kittens. In other words, they weren't serial killers. They were awesome people. The second one was really athletes. For those from Portland, you'll know that we've got Adidas, we've got Nike, we've got Columbia Sportswear. We have the background, or I'm sorry, our backyard is the Columbia River Gorge in the mountains. There's a ton of athletes. And there was a lot of people participating in Doggy Dash because they wanted to be a part of their summer training schedule. And so that was the second profile. The last one was really these fun-loving participants. These are basically your pancake breakfast, brunch-going hipsters who wanted to be a part of a community about, yeah, me too. I understand, getting like, that was me too. how are we going to pull them away from the line at Sweet ED and into, the pancake breakfast that we had to offer at Doggy Dash? So we developed these three personas that you'll see really kind of transcribed in all of our communications. So we had these different personalities for those three different personas. And I think there's a lot of people talking about the technical ways to increase deliverability and readership and engagement, but we're really focused here on what kind of content. And what was really cool about our content with these three different personas, they all had their own voice and tone, and we were finding that Portland's still a small town, so you have all these people talking about the content that we were sending out. They were looking forward to receiving a text message because it was funny, and it was engaging, and it was interesting, and it placed them as the hero in the story. So we wanted to understand that audience. We wanted to understand what related them to the cause, and then we really wanted to honor their communication preferences. So how do you go about doing that? First, we tried to evaluate the cost effectiveness of the existing channels. So we looked at what was working before. How were deliverability rates? They were doing telethons. They were doing all kinds of different things. Paid digital. They were doing direct mail and drops and things like that. How effective are those? We also asked supporters for their preferences. But again, it's very interesting because people don't say that they want to be bombarded on the street by someone with a vest asking if they love polar bears and for money, but in reality, that kind of canvassing actually converts people to give monthly. So there is sometimes a difference between what people declare and what actually works, right? So then we wanted to see in the human behavior what did work. So for this campaign, we looked at paid digital, text, email, and telethon as the primary channels to engage these folks. With paid digital, what's really cool about this is I know a lot of people are struggling with opt-in, how do you kind of get somebody initially into that journey? With an in-person event, you have a unique ability to include that through the checkout process, which is what we did. We were able to ask people through the checkout process to opt into the communications. Again, with an in-person event, it's kind of like cheating because you can require that because there's certain safety and you need to sign waivers and things like that. So there's an element there. But what we also did was we created, with those three different personas, we tested lots of different content on the acquisition side through paid digital. So we were able to then make huge assumptions that if certain content worked to convert you, then you fell into that one of those three content streams, whether you were the fun-loving community person, an athlete, or connected to the mission. So we were able to use kind of that top-of-funnel marketing to identify which message really worked for them. And then we sent them down those pathways, and I don't think you can see from back there, but I'll read you one example. So in the middle here, this is, you're gonna get swag. So this is that hipster, you're wanting a part of this community. Sit, shake, roll over, fundraise, good human. Raise $50 for Oregon Humane, Doggy Dash, that sort of thing. So it's fun, it's engaging, places them as a hero. And again, remember, we're trying to take event attendees and get them to fundraise. We're trying to upgrade them. So they already committed to the event. Now we're trying to get them to engage with the organization. And then what we did was, for those, I don't know from those who are here from a nonprofit if you feel this way, but if you're in charge of peer-to-peer fundraising, you know that people may be passionate about your cause, but they're not necessarily professional fundraisers. They need help. They need to be empowered to get out there and share their story and what connects them to the cause. So in the case of an athlete, we know that if an athlete participates as a team, they're going to raise way more money than if they do it individually. So we want to drive people with that profile type into teams and then coach those teams on how to fundraise, how to ask their friends and family for support. Or if you're a mission donor, we want to really focus on the impact that your gift is having on rescuing kittens and puppies and things like that. So finding out what motivates them and then delivering engaging content that coaches them into how to be effective fundraisers is a part of the strategy. And we had a very high read rate, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that our content was really interesting and compelling to the people who were receiving it. And we ran lots of A/B tests before we sent out a larger mass communication. And we tried to pick the most optimal communication. So we would run small tests, especially on non-transacting. A lot of nonprofits focus their effort and time on trying to get those who are less engaged, rather than trying to just say, great, of our 5,000 participants, these 3,000 are actively engaged. Let's take them to another level. So you can run your test on your other groups and then push it to your more active groups. So before we dive into the evaluation and upgrade, it's good to talk a little bit about the results, like what came of this. Again, keeping in mind the primary goal is to raise lots more money. We had a 92% increase in event participation. So we added thousands of more participants to an already thriving event that had been around for a couple of decades. Then that translated into a 121% increase in donations. We were able to raise over $1 million for Oregon Humane Society through this event by deploying these tactics. We were able to create this real sense of connection to the cause and turn those people who are passionate for their various reasons into those professional fundraisers. So just revisiting this marketing funnel, that's really when the work begins. Because as the nonprofits here will relate, people who give to an event attendee or to a fundraiser are very difficult to convert into long-term supporters, mission donors. So one of the things that we did was we deployed a new donor welcome series across different channels to then begin to identify what is this person's connection to Oregon Humane Society. Do they have a pet? What kind of pet do they have? Have they ever considered volunteering? Do they volunteer at other organizations? All kinds of different questions and different engagement opportunities to introduce them to different ways to support the organization. Great example of this, a lot of folks don't realize this, but Oregon Humane Society responds to natural disasters, not just in Oregon, but all over the country. When the flooding happened in Houston, there were many cats and dogs displaced, and OHS brought a lot of those into their no-kill shelter and subsequently had them adopted. With the wildfires in Northern California this past year, they rescued cats and dogs and horses and provided relief to a lot of animals. So by sending these people through this new donor welcome series, we were able to prime them for that upgrade ask, right? The upsell essentially in the for-profit space. We were able to deliver to them on their preferred channel a message of urgency. We need you to support this response to the disaster because you are enabling us to save these kittens. And then we actually sent follow-up communications. When the plane landed with all the rescue animals, you were able to see your impact, which was really, really cool. So it really just starts with the why. The why. Why is it that your supporter, your customer, your donor, volunteer, fundraiser, advocate, whatever, why do they feel connected to your cause? I shop at Patagonia because I believe that the planet is at risk of climate change. I have a lot of other options for where I can buy my outdoor gear. But I shop at Patagonia and I'm willing to pay a premium because I believe in that. I believe in it, it's something bigger than myself, and I have a connection to the why. The same reason why you support a nonprofit from one versus another. You have to feel really, really connected to the cause. You have to understand your role as a donor, volunteer, fundraiser, and advocate, and how that's gonna make a meaningful difference to help them solve their why. And that is all I have, so thank you so much. Happy to take any questions. Overwhelming.
How do you read the personas? Like you gather the data and you come up with the personas.
Yeah.
The three personas you talk about.
Yeah, the three personas that we talked about, how do we come up with those? We started by evaluating the data, existing data. We asked questions about why someone participated. We evaluated existing teams so we could see that there were certain teams of volunteers. There were certain teams of people who had adopted cats, who had adopted dogs. There were teams of people who were at Adidas, were at Nike, and we identified that there were different behaviors, and then we surveyed the past participants to validate our assumptions. And while there were many other reasons why people participated in Doggy Dash, the 3 primary reasons that we found as continuous trend were those 3 major pillars.
All this data was in Salesforce.
Yeah, correct. The question is, was all that data in Salesforce? Yeah, it was. They were using Classy, an online fundraising platform that integrates with Salesforce, and they were using Pardot, obviously that integrates with Salesforce as well, and then Twilio for Salesforce. Oh, yeah.
Talk about how you try to determine what was the best channel to reach a person on, whether or not to send an SMS or email.
Yeah, absolutely. How did we come to the determination about what was the right channels to send folks communications on? First, we asked people during the checkout process if what channel they preferred, text message, email, if they prefer to be communicated on Facebook with chat, what was their preference in terms of that? And then we also ran tests where we were putting money behind different channels, text and digital, and we actually create unique tracking links for each of these profiles on each different channel to track what converted the highest. And then we looked at that data and said, okay, now we're going to double down on this channel or with this message. Yeah.
I've worked with a couple of nonprofits I work with that have done a lot of surveys to see what their donors or their users want.
Yeah.
And over the last 10 years, let's say they run, some of them are 3 or 4 surveys and then never acted on the data. What would you do if you are now just joining that nonprofit or working with them, and now you want to run another survey to actually understand, because the data is 5 or 10 years old,
Yeah.
but still have those people trust that you're actually going to do something with the data finally this time instead of the last 3 or 4 times that you've asked and haven't done anything?
Yeah, I think that's a common problem, especially at nonprofits. They're really under-resourced. And so the question was, how can we, if someone has already deployed surveys in the past but then didn't do anything with the data, how are you going to prove that you're actually going to do something with it moving forward? Well, I think first and foremost, it's about having a plan and saying, like, this is how we're going to follow through with it. We actually run into this all the time where people are at capacity. They don't have the time or resources to invest in where the direction they want to go. But if you can help them identify what is high impact, low cost work, and follow through is key, you have to basically evaluate and say, the other thing is, like, people want to measure everything and they want to wait until it's perfect, but perfection is useless because we could have waited and tried to further define these personas, but we were like, look, we can make this actionable. So I think if you can look at the existing data and find any trends and say, we don't have to redo the whole thing, but it would be nice to validate that our assumptions are correct in this way. And if they are correct, these are the specific 3 steps we plan to take in the next 90 days to turn this into conversion. We run 90-day sprints all the time at Cosmic because it's so digestible. It's like, great, 90 days, we're going to increase event participation, whatever. Yeah. Time for maybe one more if there is one. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming. Really, really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.